On that note, I want to introduce someone that doesn't need introduction. I have had the pleasure of working with him, met him for many years, called my friend, and Hugo Guerra.
Hello. Hello, everyone. So thank you so much for coming. I know it's been a long day, it's been a long week, but I'm very, very grateful that you can spend the end of the afternoon with me. So this presentation is going to go and fluctuate between a keynote and a live presentation in Nuke. First of all, I would like to really thank the Foundry for inviting me. Thank you so much. You are always very lovely to invite me every year here to FMX, and it's always great to be at FMX with you. It's literally one of my favorite shows of the year. It's always great to meet old friends. So today I bring Warhammer Vermintide 2. It's a live-action trailer that I directed. I directed it for an agency called Fire Without Smoke. First, let's kind of talk about a little introduction. Basically, you know, my name is, I'm a director of VFX Supervisor. My name is Hugo Guerra. I'm from Portugal, and I've worked for almost 20 years in the industry. I've worked at the BBC, at Nexus, Jellyfish, The Mill, Fire Without Smoke, and now currently Hugo's Desk, which is my company. I've done a lot of work, a lot of different work over the years, from commercials to short films to game cinematics. You can definitely check out my website at hugo-guerra.com. Not to be confused by the other Hugo Guerra, which is also very famous in social media, which is a hairdresser stylist, which is called Hugo Guerra Cruz, and it's not me. That's not me. I've done trailers and cinematics for a lot of video games, sometimes in-game cinematics, sometimes just TV commercials, sometimes just trailers. Today we're mainly talking about the Warhammer Vermintide 2 trailer. But before we even do that, let's take a 360 photo. It's already mandatory that I do this every year. This one was the one I did last year. If anyone is here from last year, they can try to find themselves. And I'm going to go into the middle here and take the photo. So I'm going to ask you to all look at the lens. And don't worry, because you won't remember this tomorrow. We'll be fine. So I want you all to look at the lens. Now, if you do not see the lens, that means your face is being blocked, okay? And you're missing the opportunity to feature on my next year's presentation. So look at the lens and smile for the camera. Yay! And I'm going to take another one for safety. Okay, thank you so much. And now for something completely different, Warhammer Vermintide 2. Of course, before I even open any script, or before I even talk about the new composites of this, let's watch the trailer, really. For those of you that don't know, Vermintide 2 is a game, a multiplayer game. You can play with your buddies. It's a really nice game to play in co-op, at least, and also multiplayer as well. It's been out for about a year. So I really recommend you to kind of check it out. But without further ado, let's just look at the trailer first. And so that project was done using these applications. We kind of built the pipeline. It's a remote pipeline that we used. For those of you that were this morning on my talk, I go more into detail into that. But we use Nuke X for all the compositing, Nuke Studio for the entire editorial process, delivery and grading. F-Track for tracking the entire project overseas because we had a lot of remote artists. Skype and Dropbox for communication and file sharing. Houdini for 3D and Final Cut in Photoshop because you kind of have to. This was kind of one of the first projects where we kind of like started using more and more Houdini, and we kind of left Maya a little bit. So, and you know, we left Maya because things, you know, like I kind of feel like Maya is a bit of an overcomplicated software, and I'm trying to leave it, just like, you know, you leave hard drugs, I guess. This project was all entirely done in motion control. We used very tiny little figures. How many of you in this room here actually paint Warhammer figures? Just one person. Oh, this is it's a tough crowd then. Sorry, I'm doing that, but I can hardly see anyone. So basically, we went over and painted almost 1,000 figures by hand with the supervision of Games Workshop, of course. And then, of course, we've kind of like constructed these huge dioramas of battles together with some models. We used green screen so we can extract all the layers, and then use motion control so we can kind of like repeat the layers. So we can have multiple layers, you know, like multiple rats with multiple lighting setups, multiple fog setups. That's kind of how we did it. Motion control really gave us the opportunity to actually work on the trailer beforehand, so we could animate all the cameras even before we even went to shooting it. And at Stiller Studios in Sweden, they kind of have like a Maya rig that a camera rig in Maya that is actually completely bound with the reality of the actual rig that they have for real life. That means when you animate this camera, if you go beyond the boundaries of this camera, it breaks. You know, it doesn't let you animate things that are not possible to achieve on this motion control, which is really cool. The reason we did motion control, and you'll see on the plates a bit later in Nuke Studio, is mainly because of the size of these figures. You can't really do a handheld camera. You can't really move the camera too much. It has to be very precise movements. And especially you have to be very precise with the depth of field. Everything had to be mechanized and automated. Otherwise, it would not work. We also constructed some lighting rigs for the model so that we would do some light interactions for the Houdini plates as well. And then, you know, motion control kind of helped us to do that. We used the Monster 8K. It's such a fitting name for the camera. But we filmed in 8K, and then we worked in 4.6K, as you're going to see when I open the scripts. Just to give you like a heads up of how, for me, 4K exists in the world. 4K is a bit of a pain in the ass, especially because everything is visible in 4K. Every single detail, everything is always visible. And I'm sure in this room people have done 4K and you know exactly what I mean. We, of course, did the customary HDRIs. I'm going to skip through these slides because I did the presentation this morning already, and I have recorded that presentation, so you can watch it on YouTube on my channel later on. But we ended up like photographing. I am going to show you this on the Nuke scripts. We ended up photographing all the rats so we can do some photogrammetry of all the rats because, of course, some rats were in very difficult, tricky positions. We couldn't really, you know, photograph them with wires and such things. And so we developed these really, really simple models of the towers, simple models. And this really allowed us to position extra 2D layers in Nuke and position extra rats that we could render them inside of Nuke so that we can kind of like put more and more and more rats to make it look like it was even more than it was. We did 2 separate sets on photogrammetry, and then we had about 20 different rats that we've UV'd and did the photogrammetry and then brought them into Nuke and rendered them with ray trace inside of Nuke. And it worked really well. It was very heavy, but it ended up working really, really well. We also had a lot of fog passes. I discussed this morning that the fog passes have a huge challenge because the camera needs to go faster so the fog looks like it's slower. Otherwise, it looks like a miniature. So you have a lot of those challenges to actually slow down the fog. And especially lining them up is going to really be difficult. You're going to see on the Nuke Studio script where the fog passes don't completely line up with the normal passes because of the shutter speed. As much as we could try to change the shutter in the motion blur of the camera, it doesn't really completely work. You always have to kind of like mess around with some paint work and some roto to try to fix these things. So overall, we had a really great time. And this was the Nuke Studio script, which we conformed. I conformed the entire project inside of Nuke Studio. Like I said, 8K plates converted to 4.6K plates. And we basically, I'm going to open the Nuke Studio script and kind of show you a little bit of it. And then, of course, so I'm gonna do that right away. So I'm gonna just open up the Nuke Studio. Don't be shy, you know. I came all the way from London. I know it's not too far, but it is still a bit far, you know. I mean, it still took me a couple of hours to get here. Well, a couple of reasons. So first of all, the reason is that Octane costs money, and I had very limited budget, and I kind of wanted to use what I had at hand, you know. And Nuke was right there, and it had the ray trace, and it worked. It looked fine. I first thought of doing Octane. I really did, but then after trying it, I just didn't use it because it was giving me good results. Sometimes it's all about the budget. It's all about the money. So it would have cost a bit to buy like 3 or 4 licenses of Octane just to do this project, you know. Any other questions? Don't be shy. This is going to take a little while. It is a big project. It's almost open. I just have to wait for it to wake up. It is 8K plates. I mean, we have to give them a break, you know. It is like, and this is an old machine. It's like a trash bin, so it's going to take a while. Any questions? I do, yes. So at this stage in here, I have a rate system in Thunderbolt, which is 2 M2 blades, and they're running at about 2,000 megs a sec. And then I have the substitute of my rate system. So on my house, on my office, I have a rate system. Obviously, I didn't brought my rate system because it wouldn't fit on the bag. So I brought like a smaller drive. I brought like an onset hard drive with so that I can at least kind of bring the plates. But that drive is only running at 400 megs a sec, so it's a bit slower than my rate system. My rate system runs at around 1,000. So, yeah. The final editing was in Final Cut Pro because it wasn't really the final. It was the beginning, really. We did so many animatics in the beginning, even without footage, and it was really a fast pace where we were with meetings with clients. I had the Final Cut in my laptop. We had just basically the proxies animatics from Maya. So we ended up using Final Cut because it was just really quick to go through things really, really quickly. But at some point when we locked the edit, that was when we moved to Nuke Studio, and we never left Nuke Studio because then we had an ADL from Final Cut. That EDL kind of connected, it wasn't an EDL, sorry, it was an XML. We connected all the plates through an XML, and then we connected to the actual raw red files instead of connecting it with just proxy QuickTimes, you know. I could have edited in proxy inside of Nuke Studio that phase, but it was just snappier in Final Cut. But we still adjusted the edit quite a few times even after that. So, so just to give you like an idea, we had to separate everything per shots because, of course, every shot had like separate things to do. So I'm just going to open up the full edit. So if I'm going to show you here, so this is the Conform. So this is the full edit that we, no, it's not. No, sorry, this is the Conform. Yeah, that's right. So we conformed shot by shot. The shot I'm going to talk to you about is shot 70, which is this one. So this shot is a shot that we shot with all these layers. We have, as you can see here, I have multiple names for the track, so they can kind of, every time I do a name for the track, that becomes a folder inside my pipeline. And so we had multiple plates. We had this, which was we were trying to get the wires to work, but it didn't really work. I'm just going to put this in automatic so you can kind of see a better quality. Didn't really work really well, and as you can see, we have like a mush of clay here with a bunch of rats. The idea would be that all the Houdini simulation would go around that, but we ended up not using that at all. We ended up like basically just covering it with an explosion. We had some lamps inside, some paper inside, just to make it work. This was one of the layers. Of course, we had multiple layers. We had also a fog pass, so this was kind of like a faster fog pass. We ended up not using a lot of fog on this specific shot. It's taking a little time to play because this is 8K that it's playing, so that's why it's taking a bit of time. And these were kind of like the plates for this specific shot. We had the rats with the wires. We then had one fog pass. We had then the lightning pass, because you see in here, whenever we have the lightning rays showing up, that means we can kind of like pretend that there's a lightning by switching plate to plate. So the way we did it was that we shot one plate with one light bang in front of the actual wall, and then we shot another light on the side of the wall so that we could replicate. That means that we had 3 different lights, and that way we could just have a feeling of flashing. And then I had also the last pass, which was the main pass that we used without any lightning going on. In the beginning, when we were still doing this project, the plan actually was to, I don't have all the frames with me, so the plan was actually to start all the way from the beginning here. And you should see that on motion control, this is the kind of thing we use to sync up all the plates. You see that little thing that just popped out on the screen there? This thing has a little lamp there. So this is what at Stiller Studios, they call this a blipper. And that's kind of your frame of reference. So this means that this is frame 0 of the actual Maya scene. That means when you're lining up with your 3D camera or lining up with your Maya scene, you then know exactly which frame you need to line up. Of course, it goes away real quick. It's just really for you to line up all the plates. And then as soon as you, of course, if you don't line up to that frame, then everything, of course, goes off balance. I just wanted to show you the fog problem. You see here, for example, if I go to this area here, and I, for example, turn on the fog. So this was one of the biggest problems we had with the fog. Unfortunately, because of the speed, you see how different the plate is? Even with motion control, this shot was actually the worst of them all. We had a lot of shutter issues between the cameras. Even when we tweaked the shutter speed of the red camera, we still had like an enormous problem. Once we had all the clips set up, then of course I kind of export them all into my pipeline. I have like, this is kind of the structure of my pipeline. Basically using Nuke Studio structure to create a path to the project. So as you can see here, we have like the shot numbered, which picks up the name of the shot from the timeline. We then have a track and a version. And you see here where I have like the brackets of track. That's kind of what I was saying, that it picks up the name of the track specifically through here. So that means when you have a fog pass and you have a lightning pass B, a lightning pass A clean plate, you can then just name the tracks, and then that becomes folders in your project so that you can kind of keep track of everything. This is kind of how I worked. I built this for this specific project. But I tend to have like a specific naming convention depending on the project we're doing, if it's like a full CG or a live action plate. And again, like I said, if you have any questions at this stage, you feel free to ask them, you know? Don't be shy. Does anyone have any questions? No? Well, in most shots, we were not really able to do clean plates because that meant that we would glue all the figures and then we'd have to unglue all the figures again, one by one, and then glue them back again. It didn't really work because in the beginning, because you can't do it reverse. Like I can't do the clean plate first and then put the figures because you change lights and you put the figures, then you reframe and you do changes. It became so time-consuming to do the clean plate that we gave up. We kind of didn't do it. But we did have some specialized plates. For example, if you look at shot 20, which I'm not showing you shot 20 on the comp, but shot 20 had more plates. I'm going to just show you what's going on here. There's a lot of plates here, so I'm just going to show you that. I'm just going to zoom out here. So the main plate would be this one here. I'm just going to switch this thing on. This is the main plate of shot 20, where you basically see the rats and you see the bridges. And as you can see, we didn't really have, I don't have all the frames with me, so because otherwise I wouldn't fit on the drive. So as you can see, we didn't really had a lot of tunnel. We only made like a little piece of tunnel, and then we had a couple of bridges. And then what we did, again, here we have like a really good frame of the blipper. So that's the frame that you have to sync with the whole thing, including the cameras. And the cool thing about this is that then after a while, let's see what's the last frame I have. Yeah, the last frame is like around here. See, this is pass 1. And then if I go in here, you see I have other backgrounds. So for example, this one here would be the background, the real background. So basically what we did is we would shoot one plate and then move the whole tunnel to the back and then rearrange the bridges and shoot it again. So that means that, I'm just going to switch all these on and just switch one at a time so you can see. So you see how they work there. You basically have all the different bridges coming to the front. Then you have a closer one. Then you have a closer one. Then you have some fog passes. And especially I wanted to show you this fog pass, which is really cool. It's really dark, so I'm going to just gamma up so you can actually see. This fog pass was actually created in purpose just to make like a special, like some kind of volumetric pass that we could use. And as you can see here, what we did is we've drilled some holes on the ceiling so we could have some rays coming in. So, and that kind of worked almost like a fake depth pass. That was the cool thing about these sets. We ended up working like a CG pass. You know, we could do a diffuse pass, which was much more bright, and we could do like left light, right light. We would block out the whole set so we can just do a volume pass. It really gave us an opportunity. I ran out of time on set. We only shot it for one day. Did the whole thing in one day. If I had more time, I would have also set rest with a lot of water so I could have some specular passes as well. But I really kind of like ran out of time to do that. So, but let's just move on to the actual edit so I can kind of show you this as well. Does anyone have any questions at this time? Yep, I used Cronus. I added shutter to the other plate where I could, but I used painting, so it was very nasty. Basically, I had like one plate and the other, and then I would paint on the most worst parts. I would paint in using a reveal from another plate, you know, basically using the roto reveal. It was really nasty because then we just painted certain sections of it. But it worked fine. But it is something that we could have avoided if we would have, at the time when we shot, we didn't really thought it through, you know. We should have we should have calculated the actual shutter that would have worked for all the shots. But then you would have lost the motion blur, which is also very cinematic. So there was a lot of downs and, you know, cons, and it was a bit difficult to kind of decide. So, but you know, in the end, we've kind of managed to get it to work. I'm opening the final edit here just to show you real quick. Like I said, these are massive production shots. It's not going to open as fast as it does on my house. This is the final edit, actually. And, you know, as usual, I'm going to focus on shot 70, which is the one we're going to work in Nuke anyway. So once it's open, so I'm just going to like do that and kind of like select that shot once it lets me. So we ended up like using Nuke Studio for the final grade. We did it in 2 phases. We had a specific script just for the grading, which we had on the timeline. I couldn't get it to work this morning when I was testing this, so that's why it's not on this timeline, because it doesn't work outside my office, because I have some custom tools. But we had a specific script that we can deep inside the Nuke Studio and kind of do some final tweaks on grading. And then, of course, we had a couple of color correctors on top of that grade just to finish off, and that was on the client session. During the client session, we basically just used the black magic out of Nuke Studio to kind of like, we had a vector scope as well, and we kind of like finished the edit like that. And of course, we had the mandatory versions. Like, we had a lot of versions on this project. I think this shot specifically went to version 39. And, you know, usual typical thing, you know, clients always like changing things and changing ideas, but we went through a lot of stages on this kind of shot. So if I go to the first version, you'll see what I mean. So that's the first version where we still had the beginning of the shot, then we kind of went to version 2, which was, bless you, which was just like a pre-comp with some roto. We then added the matte painting. We started putting other matte paintings. We experimented with other parts. We then had the first pass of the explosion, which was a bit nuts, the first version we had. So we kind of abandoned this thing because it was a bit crazy. We did some more semi-transparent versions of the fire. We did other versions where we had a huge blast instead of having a normal blast. We then started to kind of have different versions in a bit more simplified fire. The client kind of felt that it was too big, so then we kind of like dropped it really to a different size. You see the jump in frames is because we kind of changed the edit at some point during the production. And then we kind of like started adjusting and started adding some HDR lighting into it. We started adding some flares into it. We started kind of like adding a flare because a flare always makes everything better, you know. So basically on the middle there on the explosion, we then added, at some point we switched it from blue, which was the main color of the game, and we had to switch back to green because they changed the tonality of the game. So we kind of had to go to a green color correction. We added some sparks using Nuke. We ended up adding even more rats in the front, integrating better the explosion, and I think I must be almost on the final version now. Yes, I am, just one more, and that's it. Between the two versions, there's almost any difference. There's like literally just some problems here that we kind of solved. So this was kind of like a waiting game, you know, like it reminds me of this slide here. That was kind of like how I felt when I was doing all these versions during all that time. But, you know, it's all for the benefit of the project, I guess. But one thing I wanted to let you know is that, of course, this took a while to render, and then we went to Nuke once all the plates were done. So does anyone have any questions about this process? Or, yes? I do, yes, I do. I do. On this one, I can't remember. I'm going to just double check. I believe I had 15 frames, I think. Maybe, let's just double check. Yeah, 12. I had 12 frames of handles on this project. And I started all my frames on 1001 because so that if you change the edit, you can go back. Otherwise, you can have negative values, you know. Back then, I wasn't on ACES yet. I didn't change my pipeline. Currently, I have an ACES pipeline. But back then, I wasn't using ACES yet. Yeah. Any other questions? So I have a little tip. For those of you that were already this morning, you probably already know this. But and for those of you that weren't here this morning, shame on you. You should have been here this morning. But while we were editing, and of course, this is a time lapse of all this edit and all this syncing of all the plates. This took quite a long time to render out because, of course, it's 8K to 0.4K. to 4.6K. We didn't really have a red rocket card on the machine, so it took a while to do it. So I have an advice for everyone here. You should buy an ice machine. It's a great way to pass time. So every time I had a render, I would just go downstairs and make more ice. The ice machine can make a full bucket of ice in 6 minutes, which was fantastic. It only costs $94.99. And it changed my life. It revolutionized my life. It changed my life so much that I now cannot drink anything without ice. That's how bad it is. But let's go back. Let's go to Nuke and kind of show you that script. I really wanted to talk about that shot in specific. So I'm going to close Nuke Studio because I only wanted to really show you a couple of things. The fastest way to close Nuke Studio is definitely that one. I just don't want to wait. I can't. I don't want to wait. It takes too long to close, so you just force quit it, and then you'll be fine. Now I'm going to open up Nuke through my pipeline. So I have a specific script that opens Nuke. The reason I do this is because I have, of course, my own custom gizmos and my own custom pipeline to run Nuke. I don't really run the vanilla Nuke, the one that is installed normally. So yeah. So questions about anything you like, except life in general and love. I won't give you any answers on that. Any questions? Yes, I can't see you, but it's me. Oh. No autosave.
Quick question, Hugo.
Yes.
Did you comp in 8K or 4K? At what point did you go to the delivery format?
I comped, so we comped everything in 4.6K. So I had just a little bit more than 4K to comp. That's how we That's how we delivered. And then I just downscaled it just at the end on the editorial to 4K. Reason we did 4.6K is because I knew that the client would want to tweak a bit and zoom in a little bit and pan a little bit and do this and that. So I wanted some extra leverage. But this is a typical process. You tend to work on higher resolution than what you're delivering. That's how it kind of works. Although it was all pointless. Have you seen 4K on YouTube? It's not 4K. It's this mush of pixels. It's almost like mushy peas. You don't even see anything. So it's pointless to do 4K for YouTube. Might as well do 3K and save the border, and you can just upscale it with a sharper node in Nuke. It works beautiful. Just like the old school days we used to do with 720p. Clients would ask for HD, and we would do it in 720p. No one would know the difference. Anyway, while I'm opening this, more questions. And like I said, I have a custom pipeline. As you can see, this is my custom pipeline. On it, I can open any shot I want on this project. I made this because my compositors are all remote, like I said on my talk this morning. And so they have access to the same scripts, and then I want a fast way for them to not have to relink any plates, you know? So for example, if I go to shot 70, which is the one we're going to talk today, I have multiple comps. because we had multiple stages, of course. The final comp, for example, you can see we have 40 versions, including the FMX version, which is the one we're going to open today. And you see we have like grading, fixing flickering, we had like better thunder, faster lightning. We just basically have some notes, and we can see who's did what, you know. At the end, it's all me, and at some point you have Bjorn here as well working a little bit on it. And I think Bjorn, there wasn't any plates with Joachim on this one, because there's another compositor on this project. And so if you go, for example, to shot 60, same kind of deal. You kind of have like all the versions, a lot more versions, 61. But I'm going to start by just kind of showing you step by step of this shot. So I never work in one single comp. I kind of start with, of course, the undistortion. So I'm going to open up the undistortion clip, because all the CG would have to be redistorted. So this is, oh, by the way, that window that popped up, that's telling me that there are new renders and new plates. So my pipeline automatically detects if there's a new render, or if there's a new plate or a new pass. So it could load them up automatically. So this was kind of like our pipeline for distortion. Of course, we didn't need to shoot the lens grid, because the motion control studio at Stiller Studios, they already have all the lens distortion nodes completely set. They just give me the distortion nodes, and they're already done, because they always use the same lenses. They always use red lenses with that red camera, so they don't need to do grids. But as you can see here, we basically have like the entire distortion. Oh, it's not switching on, because of course this is on. I'm just going to delete this real quick here, just to show you. You see, that's the actual distortion of that lens. We shot it with very wide lenses, and then of course we then tested the pipeline with the distortion for the CG, just to make sure the CG was actually working with the distortion. That's the kind of the way you work, like you leave your plate untouched, never do anything to it, and then you just distort the CG. But don't forget to distort the CG. This is the old version. You have to then do some extra pixels on the side. You have to do beyond the boundary box of the render. Otherwise, when you distort, you'll have not enough pixels for the edges. So let's move on then to the kind of, I'm only showing you a couple of clips here. I'm going to show you the keying script. So we have, like I said, we usually have different scripts for different parts, because it's just easier to, I had 3 compositors on this project, including myself. So if I was busy with the comp, then Bjorn could be fixing some stuff on keying, and then Joachim could be fixing something on the roto, and they can open the scripts, and I can just like basically just focus on having just one script. And because this is all automated, I don't really need to care about relinking shots and things like that. So this is actually the main keying shot. And of course, we had multiple layers and multiple passes. So we kind of had to kind of do multiple keys for each pass. So we had the main pass, but then also we had the lightning A, the lightning B. We basically used the IBK keyer for most of the keying, especially for these ones. These ones didn't really work very well, so we kind of gave up on these rats. I think we used maybe these 2. But this was our idea. We had these sticks, but this became such a big problem because the sticks were so big. The art department made these sticks really huge, and then we had to paint all the things. So we kind of like abandoned this idea. It was a bit of a stupid idea. Sometimes you have like some nice ideas, and then you think they're really good, but then they are not. Like you find out really quickly that they're really stupid ideas. But you see, between the plates that don't have fog, it really lines up really well. You see, there's no distortion, there's no pixel problem. I mean, there's a little slight variation there. Mainly, I didn't even notice this before. Sometimes there's a slight variation because we shoot in slow motion certain shots. We shoot with different ISOs, and depending on the keys and depending on the shots. This shot was a disaster, shot 70. It was really a disaster. We lost some plates, and we didn't really have everything. So it kind of was the worst one. That's the one I'm showing you. We also had a complete setup for also the explosion and also the rat setup. I'm going to show you really quickly the rat setup, which was all in Photogrammetry. And don't forget to ask questions if you have them, okay?
Is everything on? Yeah.
Yeah,
when you're working on different comps,
Yes.
do you then just bring it into a final comp?
Yes, I do. I'm
script
going to show
afterwards?
you in a minute.
Okay.
We'll get into the final comp, don't worry. I'll show you that in a minute. So this is the... I don't use the pre-comp node now, though. I don't like the pre-comp node, but I could have used it, I guess. This is the rat setup for the Photogrammetry. We had a separate script because it was so bloody heavy to run this thing. I'm just going to it's just loading up the thumbnails. I should have switched off the thumbnails. Sorry about that. So I'm just going to show you a piece of geometry real quick here. So It's just loading. There you go. So that's some of the photogrammetry of the rats. I'm going to just show you with the material. This is the level of detail we had on some of the rats. It's still loading the shot. Okay, so there you go. So these were kind of the extra rats. We had 12 of them that we did some UVing for it, and then loaded up the geometry, of course. They're not very precise, but they don't need to be very precise because they're so tiny on screen. So they were directly from the photogrammetry application, and then they were shaded into Nuke. This was the script of positioning them, you know. So if I go in here, for example, you can kind of see where they are. So if I go here, you see these are all the positions of all the different rats we used on this shot. We also have the actual deep position here. For some reason, this is not linked. Oh yeah, there we go. That's my mistake, because, of course, I switched hard drives when I came in here, and, of course, now it's not connected. Let me just real quick here, just change that, and then we can see the point cloud as well. So there you go. So that's the deep render that we made in Houdini. And then, of course, I did the conversion to points on deep. The other ones are not linked. We don't need the other ones, so I'm not going to waste time on those. It has to load the points, so this is kind of the deep position of those points, of the actual deep render. And this, of course, was fundamental for me to know where the rats were, you know, because then on all these shots that you saw, I could just like place this cloud and have the rats. Where are the rats? Oh, they're loading. Okay, so give it a second. There you go. So that means not on this shot, it didn't happen, but on some shots we had rats inside the explosion, like shot 60, for example, the shot before. And this is a really great way for you to actually position things. And you can actually also put them in context of lighting, and you can adapt the lighting as well. So that's the rats script. So I'm gonna spend 10 minutes on the final script. So you were asking about the final script. Just want to like show you kind of that setup. While I'm opening the final script, so I'm gonna skip some of them. I also have a flare script. The reason I have a flare script, by the way, this is a little tip for everyone here. You kind of want to have the flare. I use optical flares for all the flares that I do. But so this was the flare we used. Of course, we had the position to points in the camera to know where it was. We linked the optical flare into in 3D so that it would be actually positioned so that it actually would move. So that's the flare we had on the explosion. I then rendered this as an EXR 32-bit float so that we can kind of like have it in comp and still have a lot of dynamic range. So that's kind of how we did it. Gonna go to the final script and just kind of go through that script before we wrap up. There's never enough time to show everything, of course. That's always the case. But progressively, I will be showing more and more of this project on my YouTube channel. So if you follow my YouTube channel, you'll probably see more drops. So this is the final script. So to answer your question, it depends on the project, but sometimes I bring the whole script into it. Sometimes I only bring the render. Depends on exactly what I'm doing. On this shot, I actually brought everything because I really wanted to tweak things. And once it loads, I'll show you. So this is the whole script. Not very big. It's one of the small scripts that I usually do. They usually are much bigger than this. So it's not a very complicated script. I'm just wait until it's fully loaded. It takes a while to load everything, especially when you have deep renders and thumbnails and all those things to cache. It's all cached already. I already cached it last night, but it still takes a bit of time to load every single thing because my drives are not very fast, the ones I brought. So just give it a second. Any questions while we're waiting?
How long takes it to render the shot?
To render this shot?
Yeah, how long?
Well, we have a lot of multiple pre-renders, so I guess it's hard to know the amount. Let me just pause the cache, because I think this script specifically takes about half an hour to render, but there are parts of it that take an hour. So it depends. You know, for example, the explosion alone took an hour to render, just the explosion, which is rendered here. You see, that's just the explosion, because the explosion has a lot of particles and a lot of interaction in depth and deep as well. That's why it takes so long. But I'm going to start from the beginning just to show you the script. So obviously it all starts in the beginning. It all starts on this main plate. That's the main plate that we used. Shot on green screen, a lot of dynamic range on it. It's a red file, just a lamp and some paper inside the tower there. The alpha channel was brought from the keying script, so we had a separate script that we rendered in EXR just for the keying, and then we just brought it in. We used the kill spill, of course, to kill all the spill suppression. I like this node a lot. Sometimes I do custom spill suppressions, but this time we didn't do it. And then we have the lightning, you see. So we have this light, and then we have that light. And so we can kind of switch between them, depending on what kind of lighting effect we're having. And then I kind of have a switch here to do it. And then from there, it basically just switches in and on. And then we had like a little bit of a color correction to balance it because the client kind of didn't want blue, so we kind of took away some of the blue. This kind of thing usually is not very common to do it in comp, but the client kind of wanted to do it. We brought in this really low quality mesh just to kind of create some kind of reflection, some kind of color and shadow pass that we could bring in, and that's what this is about. We kind of brought in a shadow pass that would kind of affect the plate for the explosion to be there, and it kind of like affects the edges. It's very subtle, but it basically uses the geometry to bring in some light interaction to the rats. At some point then, of course, we reformatted it to 4K so it could fit into the shot. And then you see there's a render here. This was rendered. Because of my pipeline, whenever I want to render something, it's quite easy. Because I can just like go in here to my pipeline and I can say, okay, I want to render, let's see here. I basically want to do a new write node. It asks me what kind of thing I want. I can then tell them EXR. And if I press this, this is automated, you see. I left the awesome name, sorry about that. But this is all automated, so I don't have to, this is basically idiot-proof. Like, no one can rename anything because it doesn't allow you to rename it. It picks up the name automatically from the shot you're loading. So that means all this stuff, shot 70, version 40, ansem name, all this stuff is not possible for you to edit on any place, except me as a supervisor. You had a question? Yeah?
Hi. Do you use the lock-in trick to all the transformations, or
could you say that again?
That one with you're using that one for, I don't know, sharpening and so on, but for reformat node, I mean, is that not a little bit overkill, or is it really worth it? Or
it depends on what kind of sharpening you're making. Like this specific one was cubic, but I had some plates where I did Lancaster 4, and that kind of sharpens a little bit. So it is a little bit of an overkill, but it's a safety measurement, like in case it has a problem, you know. I didn't notice any problems if I didn't have them, but it doesn't really cost me anything to have them there in case there's any black edges that develop, you know. So that's kind of why I have them there. So whenever I do transforms, reformats, or sharpens, I use it, yes. So then I render that with an alpha channel as a DPX EXR 16-bit, came into the plate. And here we have your matte painting. So this is a matte painting by our wonderful matte painter, David Gibbons. This is 15K matte painting, because we use this as a panorama for different shots as well. We, of course, separated that, put it on cards, used the camera, and, of course, did some depth of field. The result of all of that was kind of this render. We also applied the distortion as well. Result of that was this simple, really simple camera move, really. That just moves like that. I'm just going to play it back here. There's really there's almost no parallax between the layers, but we just made them in parallax, but it didn't really need to. It was so defocused anyway, so it was a bit pointless, but it's just a little extra detail. We render that because, of course, with the lens distortion, it takes a long time to process. We then merged the background with the matte painting. We had a bit of light wrapping there. We then had the fog pass. The fog pass on this shot was very subtle. We didn't brought in a lot of it. So ended up doing a dispill to the fog. You corrected the fog, removing the blue. Reduced the intensity of the fog quite a lot. We formatted the fog and then merged it as a screen operation. So you basically just have a little hint of it coming into the scene, kind of just to fill up a bit of smoke and a bit of atmospherics into the scene. That's pretty much it. We had an edge blur just to fix the blur on the edge there. Then this is the entire interior fire that we had, which is rendered here. So this was just on that side, on the staircases there, we had some fire inside. Then it comes really the explosion. The explosion is really the complex shot here. So we had a really little small pre-comp here, so we could at least see how the deep renders would work. And we rendered all of them using deep, so we could have like the full fire with no holes. So we didn't really use all dot mats, you know, so we can have it in deep. That way, when we comped, for example, the particles, we could kind of merge them together without having to worry where these particles should be in space. Because obviously these particles on the middle here should be in the middle of the explosion. But with deep, they just merge seamlessly into the explosion. We did the same thing with the smoke as well, the layers of smoke we had. We did the same thing with the actual tower and the rats. The rats that were in Photogrammetry that I showed you before, they were actually rendered in Nuke with the scan line in deep. So we can actually place them using deep compositing to merge them with the deep from Houdini. I know I said deep, deep, deep many times. Sorry about that. So any questions about that?
Have you ever had an issue when rendering stuff from Houdini and using the deep render outer scanline node to have like a mismatch of the deep coordinates? Like the two deep render not actually being in the same position, even if they are geometry-wise?
I'm afraid I did not have that issue before, no. Okay, well, I guess then we won't show anything else then.
No, so one more thing and then we go.
Okay, so the explosion here, which is the most cool part of it anyway, so I'm going to just wrap that up. We basically separated the explosion in different layers. So we had like the inner explosion, we had the kind of the other side of the explosion, and then we had like just the smoke and the inner glow. We kind of merged it using just normal AOVs. And then we had like a huge amount of exponential glows. We had like outer glows, inner glows, little small glows, even smaller glows, different parts of it, kind of to just bring like this kind of HDR look to it, so that it would look like it would be more lit up. So you kind of like merge one glow, and you get like that beautiful part there, kind of merge more glow there. I know this looks a bit crazy because it's not comped yet. And then you get more even, then you get more even, and get more even. So you can kind of build like these really nice inner fires inside the explosion, which really bring this kind of, it makes it look more like it's a hot lava explosion, you know. Obviously, once this is merged, it doesn't look that crazy because, of course, it gets merged with more plates in CG and then with smoke. And then by the time it's here on the script, the glows kind of lose intensity because then it's being merged with the fact that there's fog as well. But the cool thing about using glows like that is that then you have this kind of melting feeling between the edges, and you don't really see where they begin and when they finish, you know. But we need to wrap up, so, you know, I'm sure I'll do this on my YouTube channel. So just to show you that we had the flare as well, just to wrap up this here. We had a bit of a reframe. The client asked to be just over slightly closer. It was like a pixel or so. We had the green tint at the end. We then had some vignetting, some sharpening at the very end with some grain. We didn't use the grain from the camera. We just used the grain. We made up a grain. So that kind of was how the final shot looked like. I'm going to just switch to my keynote so I can wrap up. And I'm going to just like go back. I'll show you the breakdown of the shot we just saw. So at least you can see. I always ran out of time, always, because I talk too much. That's the problem with Portuguese people. So this is the breakdown of that shot, layer by layer and pass by pass, just like you saw it, together with the explosion and the shadow interaction and kind of like the glows and all of the things. I mean, at some point I will comp this shot in Twitch. So you will be able to see it more in detail because I will comp it live on Twitch. Probably in next month or so. I'm planning to comp this shot next. Or maybe shot 60, which is the shot just before this one. So that's kind of like how the shot looked at the very end. So just to wrap up, like just so you know, we were only 3 Nuke artists, including myself, 1 Roto artist and 1 Houdini artist and a matte painter. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter, Hugo Guerra. It's always good for you to know when my streams are going to happen, when my YouTube videos are going to happen. Also, my YouTube channel, Hugo's Desk, where you will find this presentation. Also, the presentation I did this morning, I'm also going to publish it there, which is a more in-depth behind the scenes of the project you just saw. And then if you want to help my YouTube channel, you can support it on Patreon. And also follow me on Twitch. I'm doing weekly streams. Every Thursday at 6, I do a Twitch stream where I basically do a shot live. And we kind of comp together and I answer questions and all those things. Okay, cool. So then, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, mate.
And this was, I had a Q&A, but that's why I did the questions while we were doing it. But the Q&A was brought to you by Weekend at Bernie's. This is a wonderful film you should all watch. I'll leave the trailer while you're leaving, so you can watch it.